I analyzed the birth chart of 100 of the wealthiest people alive or who ever lived, and I made myself one promise going in. I would not cherry pick. I would not fit the data to the theory. I would follow the number wherever they led. I tracked every planet, every sign, every aspect, every house ruler. The most common Mars placement across 100 billionaire birth charts, weak Mars. The most common Jupiter Sun in those same 100 charts, Jupiter in its fall. The most common position for the ruler of the second house, the house that literally governs your money, the 12th house, the house of hidden things. And if, like me, you are on the journey of learning astrology, stay with me because by the end of this video, I can promise you one thing. You will never look at the placement the same way again.
It's way more fun on Talks by the Stars.
Here's the first thing I found. And honestly, it was both the most boring and the most liberating thing in this entire dataset. Almost everything was evenly distributed. Signs, planets, the rulers. When I ran the numbers, there are no dramatic anomalies. No sign show up 10 times more than another. No single planet dominated the chart in the outer wealthy. And you know what that means? There is no magic placement. But when I looked deeper, I saw the patterns, certain combinations, certain house connections, certain aspects began appearing again and again and again. These are not the patterns the astrology books promised. They are far more interesting. So let's go. Let's start with the ascendant, the mask you wear, but also the entire operating system of your chart. When I looked at the distribution of the rising signs, fixed and earth signs quietly dominated Virgo, Scorpio, Taurus, Leo. And the reason is not complicated, but it is profound. These are the signs most architecturally designed for accumulation, not for excitement, not for adventure, for building. And if you have a fixed or earth ascendant, check it right now. You have potential. Sun signs. The first thing everyone looks at, and here's what the data actually says. And guess who is leading all sun at 16% of the 100 charts? Arcos, Leo. The two most pronounced axes were Leo Aquarius and Taurus Scorpio. It represents the weak sun quality, and the sun in Leo is particular. The classic astrology books are right about one thing. It confronts the desire for a certain kind of life, a life of luxury. Now the moon. And I need to be upfront with you. The section of the data has the smallest samples, only 60%, because without the exact birth times, the moon moves too fast to track reliably. But in the charts where we did have confirmed times, one pattern emerged clearly. Cardinal moon signs dominated: Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. What does it tell us? Impulsive? Sometimes. Far from the perfectly balanced? Often. But in the chart of the people who build generational wealth, the moon is pointed toward beginnings, not an analysis. Okay, this one genuinely surprised me because it contradicts one of the most romanticized ideas of astrology. The top Venus signs across this 100 billionaire chart were Aquarius, Scorpio, Virgo, Gemini. And here's the thing, Scorpio and Virgo, even Gemini, are classically considered the worst placement for Venus. What does this tell us? These are not people who spend lavishly on pleasure. They are people who are guided more by material values than emotional ones. In relationships, in finances, in everything. The paradox of this data confirmed. A bad position for Venus can actually bring financial stability and enrichment. When I look at Mars suns across 100 billionaire charts, the largest clusters, the most common placement, both in the sun traditionally classified as weakest for the Mars, Cancer, Taurus, Libra, but also Leo and Aries. I expected to see a strong Mars in Leo or Aries, but weak Mars in the chart of the wealthiest human on the earth? How? How? And then I pull up Sam Altman charts, the man who took a small AI research lab and became billionaire. And everything confirms. Taurus ascendant, Taurus sun, weak Venus, weak Mars, and Moon, not strongly cardinal, not special activated, but immovable, patient beyond. This is not the chart of someone who explodes into the scene. This is a chart of someone who quietly, methodically, relentlessly built something extraordinary. Now, Mercury. The top Mercury signs were Libra, Aquarius, and Virgo. Virgo is Mercury exaltation. Aquarius gives Mercury something extraordinary, non-standard thinking. And Libra, the best communicators. After the Mars founded, I thought I was prepared for surprising. I was not. The numbers 1 Jupiter Sun across 100 billionaires charts, Jupiter's false signs, Capricorn and Gemini, also not considered a great position for Jupiter. What is happening here? And then Saturn. It led in Scorpio, with strong showing in Capricorn, Aquarius, Aries, and Leo. But what do these laws do? Aries and Leo represents for Saturn very weak positions, risk takers, gamblers. And what do the Capricorn in Aquarius represents? Planners, strategists, commanders. And the data says both archetypes can produce extraordinary wealth just through entirely different mechanisms. And the last, the North Node, with the largest concentration in Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. The first sign of the zodiac, the signs of beginners. Now look at the Kylie Jenner chart. Became a billionaire, the youngest self-made one in the history at the time, before the age of 22. Here the planet positions. Sun in Leo, weak Venus, weak Mars, weak Moon, weak Saturn, 4 weak planets, 4 in a chart of billionaire. But then strong Mercury. I want you to really sit with this. By classical standards, this chart has no business producing a $1 billion empire. But my study perfectly proved this is the most typical wealth set. When I look at which zodiac signs have the most planetary positions across all 100 charts, it was the middle: Scorpio, Libra, Virgo, Leo, Cancer. Together, those 5 signs held almost half of all planetary positions across 100 billionaire charts. Think about what the middle signs represents in the zodiac symbolically evolution. There is a sign of relationships, of depth, of refining raw material into something valuable. And then the Richard Branson chart is a perfect example of this. His planets clusters almost entirely in the middle signs: Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra. The middle signs: Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Galactic, 400 plus companies, all of it built from the middle of the zodiac, from depth in relationships, from the almost supernatural ability to transform human connection into leverage. Now aspects. The Jupiter-Pluto aspects, the billionaire aspects, I did not find it in large of numbers. What I found instead were personal aspects, aspects between planets that govern activity, discipline, and original thinking. Here the top leaders: the leader Mars Sun, Sun Uranus, Jupiter Saturn, Saturn Sun, Pluto Sun, Neptune Sun, Saturn Pluto, Mars Mercury, Venus Uranus. The through line across all this: ego, discipline, originality, speed of thought. The Sun-Mars aspects create someone whose identity is their ambition. They cannot separate who they are from what they are building. The Mars Mercury and Venus Uranus aspect scream quick, unconventional, financial, creative thinking. I save Moon aspects for last because, honestly, I still find it stunning every time I look it. Because of limited exact birth times, I ran Moon aspect analysis on a separate, more reliable subset of the 60 confirmed charts. But 49 had Moon Jupiter aspects, that is 82%, and 48 had Moon Neptune aspects, that is 80%. So, how we do make sense of this? Moon Jupiter gives insatiability, a hunger that doesn't quiet. These people don't just think about wealth, they crave an emotional level that ordinary ambition can compete with. Moon Neptune adds something even more interesting, their capacity to dream beyond rational limits. Let's look at Bernard Arnault's chart, the wealthiest man in Europe. The man who turned desire itself into $150 billion fortune. Sun in exact conjunction with Mars, Jupiter in trine with the Moon. That 82% funding we talk about, the Moon-Jupiter connection. Leo ascendant, Jupiter in Capricorn, Mercury in Aquarius, Rahu in Aries, every pattern in this entire study can confirm. And then, bombshell, strong Venus, giving him something none of the other billionaires in this study had quietly so powerfully, the genial ability to feel beauty. Yes, this is a section you have been waiting to. When I track the most common sun on the cusp of the second house across 100 billion charts, one sun held ahead with striking confidence, Gemini. Most other signs were distributed almost evenly behind it. And when I look at the most common ruler of the second house, it was Mercury, the ruler of Gemini and Virgo. Think about what it actually means. The planet governs communications, connections, informations, the market, and strategic planet is the most common ruler of the money house in 100 billion charts. But that's not even the shocking part. The shocking part where the ruler of the second house most commonly placed. Here, the top two positions, leading by a significant margin over everything else, were the 12th house and the 11th house. Let that land for a second. The 12th house, the house of hidden things, and the 11th house, the house of networks, friends, communities, social media. What this tells us is almost uncomfortable in its implications. The wealthiest people accumulate money quietly, through networks, through back channels, through what happens behind closed doors and across borders. Now, the 8th house. And here, something remarkable happens. The same rules apply. The most common sign on the 8th house cusp, Sagittarius, and its ruler, Jupiter, topped the list by such wide margin. Do you understand what this is saying? In the chart of the world's wealthiest people, the planet is designed to expanding investment, inheritance, business partnerships, and collective resources. And then, here's where classical rule holds up perfectly. The ruler of the 8th house most commonly placed in the 2nd house. In plain language, other people's money become their money. Now I have to be honest with you about the 11th house, because data was completely flat. Nothing is screaming at me for the charts. No peaks, no patterns. But what matters that not the 11th house itself. It's the planet in it, which we'll get to in a moment. Let's look at a sec at the Henry Ford chart. The ruler of his second house, Mercury, placed between the 11th and 12th houses. The ruler of his 8th house, Jupiter, with Saturn placed in his second house. Neptune in the 8th house, Sun in Leo, ascendant in Virgo, and predictably, weak Venus and strong Saturn with Mars. Henry Ford's chart is not just a data point, it is a proof of this concept. Now let's look at which planet most commonly occupied the 2nd, 8th, and the 11th house across 100 charts. By a large margin, the most common planet in the 2nd house was Jupiter, the planet of wealth and expansion, sitting directly in the house of personal finances, expanding whatever it touches: incomes, assets, material resources. This is a textbook placement and the data confirm it without hesitation. Behind Jupiter, Venus, Neptune, and Mercury, all the traditionally positive planets, clustering in the money house in smaller numbers. The 8th house, no dramatic peaks, but the leaders were Neptune, Mars, Jupiter, and the 11th house. This one genuinely surprised me. The leader was Mars. These are not people who became wealthy by charging forward alone. Mars, their engine is directed toward other people, toward building communities, toward activating networks. Behind Mars in the 11th, Saturn, Mercury, and the Moon in smaller numbers. Structure, communication, and emotional intelligence, all serving the network. And finally, the chart that for me is most stunning of all because it belongs to the tennis player, Roger Federer. Enters the Forbes Billionaires list in 2026. A tennis player, a billionaire. Let's look at his chart. Weak Mars, placed in the 11th house. Jupiter in the 2nd house. Sun in Leo, ascendant in Virgo. Strong Saturn, and a concentration of planets in the middle signs. And this is the chart of tennis player, with almost every pattern my study identified. If someone handed you the chart, called you, and asked you to predict the life it described, would you have said billionaire tennis legend? Probably not, but the data would have. How many of these planetary combinations do you have? Maybe you have Virgo ascendant. Maybe you have Jupiter in the 2nd house. Drop your answer in the comments. Tell me if you're shocked, or tell me if you're disappointed. This research didn't find the magic combination that only a lucky few possess. It found patterns that show up more frequently in people who build extraordinary wealth. I'm Mariana. This is Talks of the Stars. Subscribe, because we are just getting started and there are many analyses that you definitely want to see. Follow Talk by the Stars and let's keep growing together.
It's way more fun on Talks by the Stars.